Welcome into the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and we are just 24 hours away from NBA free agency getting started, and there is a lot going on around the Miami Heat. I originally filmed a Heat free agent target list to go out on today's video, but with Davion Mitchell re-signing and some other players staying put as well, I had to refilm this video, which is why you make sure you are subscribed, because we will keep you up to date on everything Miami Heat basketball. Obviously, a lot has gone on in the last week in trade rumors, in draft picks, undrafted free agency, and Davion Mitchell re-signing, so make sure you do join the Heat Report today. And that's where we have to start today's video, is Davion Mitchell. He re-signed on Saturday afternoon with a 2-year, $24 million deal, fully guaranteed. And I said it on yesterday's show, which is also why you need to subscribe so you can not miss that type of stuff. But I do like the re-signing. He was very deserved to return to Miami. He had a career 30-game stretch with the Heat. He's never played that good in his entire life. And I hope that he is going to continue to show that that is the player that he is, and that wasn't just some crazy 30-game sample size. Now, it remains to be seen if he will be the starting point guard for Miami or the backup change of pace guard. I like him almost in that backup change of pace role more. He's not the same as CJ McConnell, but I do view him in a similar light to where when he comes in off the bench, he can play 25, 30 minutes a night, which is what he did for Miami. But I think when you have the normal starting five and then he comes in fresh legs 5-6 minutes into the game, or in those stints during the second quarter, and gives that 1,000% max effort, that is where he is most effective. So that remains to be seen, but that re-signing of Miami does put the Heat in a very tricky spot, because after that move, the Heat are now at the max 15 players that you can have on standard contracts. It's pretty crazy that they're already at 15, so heading into free agency, they really couldn't sign a single player unless they start waiving or trading players away. And that's the biggest rumors around Miami right now is, will they be able to trade Andrew Wiggins? Will they be able to trade Terry Rozier? What is happening with Duncan Robinson? He has to opt into his ETO to get $9.9 million guaranteed by 5 p.m. Eastern time today. If he does not opt into that, he would then become an unrestricted free agent, which could bring him back to Miami on a shorter term deal and a cheaper deal for the Heat, which I would be very much welcome to, because the Heat can't afford to lose shooting like Duncan Robinson at this juncture. But that $19.8 million that he would have guaranteed if the Heat do not move on from him by July 8th is just a little bit too much money at this time, even though it is an expiring deal. So I hope Duncan returns, but this is going to be an interesting day to see. Does he opt in? Then the Heat would have to make a choice. All right, we got to either find a trade partner in the next 10 days, or we just are going to flat out waive him and save $10 million. That will be probably the thing that I'm keeping my eye on the most here for Miami. But let me know your thoughts. Does Duncan Robinson stay with Miami this season? Type Y if you think he does. Type N if you think he does not. I am going to say he is ultimately with Miami, whether it is him just not getting traded, which I think would be a mistake, keeping him at $19 million, or if he ends up opting out and then the Heat and him kind of renegotiate a smaller, cheaper deal to keep him in Miami. I think both are fair options. All right, let's move on from Duncan Robinson now and talk about the latest around this team. And we'll start with Jonathan Kuminga, because he has obviously been one of the biggest free agents to be, restricted free agent from Golden State. And there's been a lot of reported interest from beat reporters and from national reporters about Miami being interested in him. They would have to pull off a sign and trade. Now, the interest from Miami's side has been kind of shot down here over the last 24 hours. Barry Jackson said the Heat are not pursuing Kuminga at this time. 5 Reasons Sports Network also said that their level of interest in Kuminga has been vastly overstated. And Anthony Chiang of the Miami Herald said that there is some level of interest in Kuminga, but the Heat are currently exploring other moves, and there has been no free agent meeting set between Miami and Kuminga. It's also being reported that the Sacramento Kings are a team that are heavily intrigued with the idea of adding Kuminga, so it's not like Miami would be able to pull off a sign and trade for the cheap. They would have to give Kuminga a contract and then figure out what a trade looks like from there. My projection would be more or less like a Kyle Anderson and Jaime Jaquez Jr. trade package, because remember, the Warriors could only take back 50% of the salary in Kuminga's first year. Those two players I just mentioned from Miami combined make $13 million. So if Kuminga gets any type of deal that is more than $26 million in that first season, it could be a descending contract, it could be an ascending contract, but as long as that first year is more than $26 million, I think Kyle Anderson and Jaime Jaquez Jr. would ultimately be the two players heading to Golden State in a sign and trade. We've talked a lot about if the Heat should do that, if I would be okay with that move. I would be okay with it because you're committing to that full youth movement. And your starting lineup would then be Jakucionis, Hero, Kaminga, Bam, and Ware, which is then 19 years of age, 25, 22. Bam's going to be 28 during the season. And then Nickeil Ware, who is currently 21. So it's like you commit to the full youth movement. Like Bam is 28, and then a couple of years he'll be 30 in his natural prime. And you hope that those other players I mentioned in the starting lineup take the steps forward necessary, and one of them really develops, whether it is a Jakucionis or it's a Nickeil Ware, to where you now have Bam at 30. Tyler Hero at 27, and then those other young cats at 24, 25, and you could compete for a title in a couple years. It would be a slow burn, but it is what I think the best way forward for Miami, because I do not see them landing a superstar max contract type of guy in 2026 free agency. And I know a lot of fans are holding out hope they would be able to do that. I just don't see someone coming available, and we have seen that free agency isn't the way to acquire people. It's all through trades and the draft. That's how you got to get superstars on your team. You got to draft well, and you got to make trades. Miami doesn't really make any trades, so it's got to be a draft, and you got to hope one of your two guys, whether it's the pick you just made in Jakucionis or the one you made 2 drafts ago in Nickeil Ware, ultimately step it up. All right, so those are the latest rumors around Miami. Before we head out of here on today's show, I do want to look at some free agent targets here that I think Miami would be smart to go after. But I could also see Miami having interest. Now, I was going to originally have Nickeil Alexander-Walker on this list, one of my favorite free agents, the unrestricted guard that's 6'6", comes off the bench, shot 38% from 3 over the last 2 seasons, and defends at an extremely high level for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think he's going to get the full mid-level, non-taxpayer mid-level, so $14 million. And as we are currently sitting here with Miami, they are in the luxury tax, so they do not have access to that anymore. And like I mentioned, they also, they don't have any roster spots available, so they would have to make a trade to free up a spot or waive Duncan and then bring in NAW. But Mark Stein is also reporting that somehow, even though it's not technically legal, the two teams that are in the final stages of Nickeil Alexander-Walker discussions are the Detroit Pistons and Atlanta Hawks. Don't know how that's possible, but I tell you what, that would be an absolute excellent addition for both squads, because NAW would be a perfect backup guard or complementary piece to Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, and he would also be an awesome complementary piece or backup guard to Trae Young. So those two teams are in on him. I would like Miami to get interested, but they would have to pull off some other moves. So another couple free agents that I want to bring up, Luke Kennard, and I'll bring up Luke Kornet, 2 players that I think are going to get the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is around $5.1 million in salary. Luke Kennard is one of the best shooters in the NBA. And if the Heat ultimately move on from Duncan Robinson or trade him, I want the Heat to pursue Kevin or Luke Kennard, and that's my number one thing. The guy averaged 43% mark from beyond the arc last season. He was awesome, and he shot 49% for the Clippers a couple years ago. And by the way, he's a career 43% three-point shooter. The guy is a sniper. Is he a good defender? No. And I do believe Duncan Robinson is the overall better basketball player, better playmaker as well. But if you are losing Duncan, I don't think there is a better sniper off the bench that you can replace him with than Luke Kennard. We also know Miami has some level of interest in bringing Alec Burks back, but as I mentioned, they would have to lose at least one roster spot before making that happen. So if we're going to see Miami make a lot of moves to the roster in the next week or so, it's more or less going to be via the trade market rather than free agency. And we're going to have to see some of those dominoes fall on the trade market before we make any signings here. A couple other free agents. I mentioned Luke Kornet. I think he would get $5 million. I would give him a 2-year, $10 million deal. I'm fine with that. Give him multi-year taxpayer mid-level. because he is 7'2". He averaged 6 rebounds in a limited role last season, also averaged 1.6 assists. Like, he has just got a good, strong feel for the game. He's also a pretty good shot blocker as well. He didn't have a huge role for Boston. He had a larger role than I think most people anticipated because of all the Porzingis missed games and stuff like that. But with Porzingis off their roster, with Neemias Queta really being the only center that they have right now, they did draft Amari Williams from Kentucky, but Al Horford's future's up in the air. I think they're going to prioritize bringing him back. But with Miami desperately needing a backup center to Kel'el Ware and Bam Adebayo, Luke Kornet is one of my favorite options, and we'll see if the Heat ultimately pursue him. Another couple big men that are interesting to me, Sharpe. He's a restricted free agent from Brooklyn. I think it's going to be a little bit hard to acquire him because he is a restricted free agent, and Brooklyn would be able to match any contract. But here's another fun name. I'll throw out Precious Achiuwa. I know, the player Miami drafted in 2020 with that 20th overall pick in front of Tyrese Maxey, but I wouldn't hate bringing him back in as your third big. I know he's more of like a 4 than a 5, but the Heat obviously liked him enough to draft him. He hasn't turned into a star by any means, and he's kind of a back end of the rotation guy, at least he was for the Knicks, but I mean, he's better than what the Heat have now at their backup spot. Like, no offense, but Kevin Love still being on this roster and taking up a spot is just an absolute joke, and I wish Miami didn't give him a 2-year contract last offseason. I was fine bringing back Kevin Love because he's an excellent leader and veteran, but he doesn't play. And he just takes up a roster spot at $4 million, and it's just super frustrating to me that we are missing out on potentially adding some real talent to this team because Kevin Love is on the roster. I'm going to round out this show with 3 more free agent targets here, but let me know who your top free agent target for Miami is. They obviously have to make a trade or waive players before they sign anyone, but let me know a player that you want down below. Last couple people I'll mention. I just briefly talked about Alec Burks, so we'll move on to 2 more. I think the Heat would be very much interested in trying to go after Bruce Brown. That's a player that they've showed interest in the past in free agency and in the trade market as well. He is an unrestricted, and after a bad couple seasons since leaving Denver with the Toronto Raptors and the Indiana Pacers and then the New Orleans Pelicans, I think he would be able to be acquired on the cheap. So that's another player that very much well could get the taxpayer mid-level at $5 million. I just don't see him getting a lot of money considering he hasn't really done anything ever since he signed that lucrative 2 for $40 million deal with the Indiana Pacers coming off that championship that he won against the Miami Heat. The last player I'll mention is Amir Coffey, the guard/forward from the Los Angeles Clippers. I think he's put together a couple good seasons there in a limited role in LA. I don't think he would be that expensive. It would be under $8-9 million, so it could be the taxpayer mid-level at 5, could be 6 or 7 on a multi-year deal. But Amir Coffey, the left-handed guy, shot pretty well from 3 this past season, high 30%, and he can defend. He's a rebounder as well. Amir Coffey is a sneaky name that, like, it's not going to make headlines around the NBA that you signed Amir Coffey, but it would just be a very subtle, nice addition to your basketball team, and I think that is what the Heat should just be trying to do at this point. I don't think big swings are necessary. I would just like to figure out what we're doing with Duncan, Andrew Wiggins, Terry Rozier, move on from those salaries, free up a couple roster spots, and make minimal changes to this roster in free agency that could ultimately complement your core or elevate you in a big way. So it is going to be interesting to see, but like I said, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because when more moves come in for Miami in the next week, 2 weeks, and beyond, we will have you covered. So see you on the next video. Go Heat.